The crowd was still cheering when the screaming started. At first, nobody understood what they were seeing. Just another player on the ground, just another stoppage. Football does this every weekend. But this time, something felt different. Opponents turned away, teammates froze, the referee stood still. And then the stretcher came out far too quickly. You saw the replay, you saw the leg, you saw the horror live on television. What you didn't see was what came after. The surgeries, the painkillers, the careers that quietly disappeared, the pressure to return before bodies were ready. These are the Premier League injuries Sky Sports showed you, and the ones they never really explained. Sky Sports shows you the impact, the stretcher, the applause on the way off. What it rarely shows is everything that follows, the injections just to train, the rushed comebacks, the careers that never fully recover. These injuries didn't just change matches, they changed lives. Number 1. Aaron Ramsey, the moment that split a career in two. On a cold February afternoon in 2010, Aaron Ramsey was 19 years old. He had already played in an FA Cup final. Arsenal had built their midfield around him. Wales were shaping their future around his career. Late in the match against Stoke City, Ryan Shawcross slid in to make a challenge he could not fully control. Ramsey's right leg was planted. The impact was direct. Both the tibia and fibula broke immediately. The reaction across the pitch was instant and involuntary. Shawcross was visibly distraught. Other players looked away in shock. The referee stopped play without hesitation. Ramsey was taken straight to hospital and into emergency surgery. The initial recovery took more than a year. But what followed was quieter and longer. Repeated muscle injuries, cautious movement in tackles, long gaps between consistent matches, a career that became defined by rehabilitation cycles rather than momentum. Before the tackle, Ramsey was establishing himself as a guaranteed starter at a title-chasing club. After it, every return carried the same question: how long would this one last? To most supporters, the injury remains one of the most disturbing moments ever shown live in a Premier League match. To Ramsey, it became the dividing line that everything else in his career was measured against. Number 2. Eduardo, the injury that altered a title race. In February 2008, Arsenal were top of the Premier League. They were young, fast, and technically dominant. Eduardo da Silva had scored 12 goals in 31 games in all competitions and had become an important part of Arsene Wenger's attack. 3 minutes into the match at Birmingham, Martin Taylor went into a sliding challenge. Eduardo's standing foot absorbed the force, his left leg broke, and his ankle dislocated on contact. Medical staff rushed on immediately. Several players turned away as they approached him. Television coverage quickly stopped showing close-up replays. Eduardo was taken straight into surgery at Selly Oak Hospital. A metal plate and screws were inserted to stabilize the fracture, and months of rehabilitation followed. He returned almost exactly a year later, but the sharpness was reduced. The instinctive movement that made him dangerous in the penalty area was less frequent. Confidence in physical contact never fully recovered. Before the injury, he had scored 12 goals in 31 matches for Arsenal that season. After it, he never reached that output for the club again, particularly in the Premier League. The consequences extended beyond one player. Arsenal's form dropped immediately after the match, with just one win in their next 5 league games as they surrendered their lead at the top of the table. Public discussion focused on the tackle. Inside the club, the impact was psychological. The team became more cautious, challenges were avoided, the pace slowed. This was not just a broken leg, it quietly altered the direction of an entire title race. Number 3. Djibril Cisse, repeated reconstruction. Djibril Cisse's first serious injury came in October 2004. Liverpool were playing Blackburn Rovers. He went into a challenge at speed. His left leg broke immediately. The fracture was severe enough that surgeons later said amputation was a possibility. He returned faster than many expected, but the recovery did not restore what had been lost. 2 years later, in a pre-season match with France, it happened again. This time, the right leg, another clean break, another operation, another year built around crutches, conditioning work, and pain management. By the time Cisse returned to club football, doctors had already warned that further trauma could carry permanent consequences. He continued his career. What followed was not a single dramatic collapse, but a gradual reduction in his explosiveness, his confidence in duels, and his ability to play consistently without pain. For many supporters, Cisse is remembered as a forward who never quite reached the level that his talent suggested. Within the medical reality, his career is something different. It is the story of a body that was rebuilt twice and then repeatedly asked to perform at the highest level, despite smaller margins for error every season. By the end of his time in the Premier League, the question was no longer whether he could reach his best, but how many more impacts his legs could safely withstand. Number 4. Abou Diaby, medical mismanagement and career erosion. Abou Diaby's injuries did not begin with his body failing, they began with a tackle. In May 2006, playing for Arsenal against Sunderland, Diaby was caught by a late challenge from Dan Smith. His ankle was dislocated, ligaments were torn, and the joint was severely damaged. The immediate recovery took months, the deeper effects lasted for the rest of his career. From that point onward, Diaby's body began to break down in patterns rather than isolated incidents. Ankle problems became reoccurring, knee issues followed, muscle injuries appeared during most attempted comebacks. Each return was accelerated by necessity. Arsenal was short in midfield, and Diaby's physical profile was rare. Whenever he seemed fit, he was moved quickly back into matches. The cycle continued for years. Return, relapse, rehabilitation, return again. By 2011, he was missing long stretches of seasons. By 2013, his appearances were measured in weeks, not months. Inside the club, there was always hope he could complete a full season. Outside, the label became simple: injury-prone. The medical reality was more complex. This was not a fragile player. This was a body that had suffered major trauma early, then was repeatedly pushed into elite competition before reaching full stability. Before the Sunderland tackle, Diaby was considered one of the most physically dominant midfielders of his age group. After it, his career became a long attempt to recover function that never returned. He left Arsenal in 2016 having made 124 league appearances in 10 years, not because the talent had gone, but because the damage never stopped accumulating. If you're still here, you're already watching this differently, so let's continue. From this point on, the injuries stop being unlucky moments and start becoming evidence of what happens when a body reaches its limit. Number 5. Jack Wilshere, youth, breakdown and psychological erosion. Jack Wilshere made his Arsenal debut at 16 years old. By 18, he was a regular Premier League starter. By 19, he was playing Champions League football. By 20, he was being discussed as one of the most gifted midfielders in Europe. The physical development that usually comes later in a career had not finished. The workload did not adjust. During the 2010-11 season, Wilshere made around 50 appearances across all competitions. Persistent ankle pain followed. In July 2011, a stress fracture was found in his right ankle. What followed was not one continuous recovery, it was a sequence of rehabilitation periods interrupted by further breakdowns. He returned in 2012, he broke down again. He returned in 2014, he broke down again. By his mid-20s, Wilshere had already undergone multiple ankle operations. Each one reduced long-term mobility, each one increased reliance on pain management just to train at match intensity. Away from the pitch, the impact was quieter. Long periods of isolation, repeated failed comebacks, public discussion that shifted from admiration to skepticism. By 25, he spoke openly about feeling as though his career was already close to finished. The technical ability remained, the football intelligence remained, but the physical base they depended on did not. Wilshere played his final Premier League match for Arsenal at 26. He retired at 30, not because of one catastrophic impact, but because the cycle of recovery and collapse never ended, and eventually removed the role that had defined his life since childhood. Number 6. Ledley King, permanent damage and playing through irreversible pain. By the time Ledley King was regarded as one of the best defenders in the Premier League, his right knee was already severely damaged. The cartilage in the joint had worn away. There was no operation available that could restore it for elite sport. From then on, his career was organized around that knee. Normal training was not possible. Most weeks, King did not participate in full sessions. Impact work was limited or avoided completely. His preparation was built around treatment and recovery rather than tactical drills. Pain relief and anti-inflammatory medication became part of the routine in order for him to play. On match days, he would be selected knowing the joint could not absorb force in the same way as other players. After games, the knee would often swell. Walking normally could be difficult until the effects of treatment subsided. Inside Tottenham, this was understood and managed as far as possible. Outside, his absence from training and frequent spells out of the team were often reduced to a simple label: injury-prone. In reality, the club were fielding a defender whose knee had a long-term condition more commonly associated with the end of a sporting career. King continued for several seasons under these restrictions. He captained the side, played against the best forwards in the league, and performed at a high level, despite a joint that could not be fully protected. He retired in 2012 when the knee could no longer tolerate the demands of Premier League football. There was no single final incident, the joint simply reached the limit of what it could withstand. Number 7. Alf-Inge Haaland, delayed consequence and a career that quietly ended. Alf-Inge Haaland's right knee was already carrying damage by the time he faced Manchester United in April 2001. During that match at Old Trafford, Roy Keane challenged him near the touchline. Keane went in high. His boot made contact with Haaland's knee. The referee sent Keane off. Haaland finished the game, but the joint was affected. In the period that followed, Haaland moved to Manchester City. He continued to play, but his involvement became limited. The knee did not settle. There were further assessments. Surgery was required. The condition of the joint worsened rather than improved. Cartilage damage and instability restricted his ability to train and play consistently at Premier League level. By 2003, aged 31, he stopped playing professional football. The official cause was persistent knee problems. Years later, Keane admitted that the challenge had been deliberate, linking it to a previous incident between the two players. By that point, the medical outcome was already fixed. Public focus remained on the admission and the rivalry. The quieter reality was that Haaland's career ended through an accumulation of structural damage in the joint that could no longer be managed. There was no dramatic final stretcher, just a gradual reduction in minutes, repeated operations, and a decision that his knee could not support elite football anymore. Number 8. Ryan Mason, life-threatening injury and forced retirement. Ryan Mason was 25 years old when his Premier League career ended. In January 2017, Hull City played Chelsea at Stamford Bridge. Early in the match, Mason challenged Gary Cahill for a high ball inside the penalty area. Their heads collided at speed. Mason fell immediately. Medical staff entered the pitch and began treatment without delay. He was taken directly to St. Mary's Hospital. Scans revealed a fracture to his skull that required emergency surgery. A metal plate was inserted to stabilize the damage. The initial concern was not return to play timelines. It was survival and long-term brain health. Mason recovered physically enough to return to training later that year. He never returned to professional football. Specialist assessments concluded that further head trauma could carry a severe risk of permanent neurological damage or death. At 26, he retired. The injury had not occurred through repeated breakdown or long-term mismanagement. It occurred in a single aerial challenge that looked routine within the flow of the game. After that, the boundary on what his body could safely endure was fixed. His football identity ended immediately. The danger came not from a visible broken limb, but from internal trauma that could not be safely tested again. Number 9. Raul Jimenez, skull fracture, brain trauma, and miracle survival. Raul Jimenez was 29 years old when he suffered one of the most serious head injuries in Premier League history. In November 2020, Wolves played against Arsenal at the Emirates Stadium. Early in the match, Jimenez challenged David Luiz for a high ball inside the penalty area. Their heads collided at force. Jimenez remained on the ground. Medical staff entered the pitch and began treatment immediately. He was taken off on a stretcher and transported straight to hospital. Scans confirmed a fractured skull. Emergency surgery was required to stabilize the damage and relieve pressure. In the weeks that followed, doctors described his survival as close to a miracle. For months, the focus was not on his return to football, but on basic neurological recovery, speech, memory, balance. Jimenez eventually returned to training and then to Premier League matches wearing protective headgear. Even after his comeback, the risk remained a part of every medical assessment. Another serious impact to the same area could carry consequences far beyond football. His case helped intensify discussion around concussion substitutes and head injury protocols in the Premier League. For supporters, Jimenez's return was a story of resilience. Medically, it remained an example of how close an elite footballer had come to a life-altering outcome from one aerial challenge. Number 10. David Busst, permanent disability and career erasure. On the 8th of April 1996, Coventry City faced Manchester United at Old Trafford. In the second minute, Coventry won a corner, and David Busst moved into the 6-yard box to challenge for the ball. As the cross arrived, he collided with Dennis Irwin and Brian McClare. His right leg became trapped beneath the impact, and both the tibia and fibula fractured instantly. The break was open. Medical staff entered the pitch without delay. Several players turned away before they even reached him. Peter Schmeichel later admitted he vomited near his goal after seeing the injury at close range. Busst was taken directly to hospital, where surgeons operated for more than 3 hours. Complications emerged almost immediately. An infection developed inside the wound, and doctors even considered amputation to prevent it spreading. Further surgery was required. Metal rods were inserted to stabilize the fractures, and skin grafts were taken from other parts of his body. Rehabilitation lasted more than 2 years. Busst never returned to professional football. The injury permanently affected his mobility, and he later described having to relearn how to walk. At the time, he was 29 years old. There had been no long-term fitness decline, no series of warning injuries, nothing to suggest what would happen. One routine movement inside the penalty area was enough to end his career and alter his life permanently. There was no return, no gradual fade from the game, only a moment that separated everything he had been before it from everything that came after. Sky Sports will always show you the replay, the slow motion, the still frames, the reaction shots. What it cannot show you in those few seconds is everything that comes after the cameras move on. The surgeries, the infections, the painkillers just to get through training, the conversations where doctors start talking about risk instead of recovery. For most of us, these moments were just part of a match we watched once. For the players in this video, they were the point where football stopped being a game and started becoming a medical file. If you want more of the stories that sit underneath the Premier League era, the parts that are too complicated or too uncomfortable for television to really stay with, you know what to do. Stay subscribed.